Hello and welcome. Hello and welcome to this live stream. I am Bill, the company's expert, and today we're going to be talking about leadership. Leadership. Wow, what a buzzword. You know, if you guys have ever been on LinkedIn or you've looked at the occasional business article, you know what I'm talking about. Everybody and everybody's brother is talking about this constantly. And I've never seen so much misinformation online. You know, I've said this before, but it seems that in the public eye, leadership is whatever we want it to be, apparently. Anyway, I wanted to do this special live stream on this special topic today. It's something I'm stepping out of character a little bit to do because I don't talk about this a lot on this channel. But hopefully some of you guys are interested in this. If you are wanting to improve your leadership skills, if you are wanting to give your career a boost, and develop some of the knowledge and the techniques and the traits of being what's commonly referred to as a good leader. That's what I figured we'd talk about. So as far as I can figure out, we're going to cover several things today. We're going to cover, first of all, what is a leader? What the hell does that actually mean? We're going to talk about the types of leaders. We're going to talk about how you can become a leader, if this is something you're interested in doing, or at least being perceived as one. And what that involves, some of the practical tips for how to do this. I'm going to share some of the things that I've done in my career that have helped me and some of the knowledge that I've accumulated over the years. And this is from being a frontline manager, like a supervisor, all the way up to the CEO level. And also, we're going to talk about, I suppose, the culmination of this would be in answering leadership-related job interview questions, because you will get those. Depending on what types of jobs you're going for. And this is more geared towards people going for higher level jobs. You're going to get asked questions like, what's your leadership style? You know, things like this that are well known. And also some lesser well known stuff where they ask you about specifically how you solve certain leadership problems or how you would behave in a situation like that. Okay, so that's what I figured we'd do today. But as I say, I mean, this is something I don't normally do, so we'll see where it goes. And depending on how many questions we get, I think I'm just going to let the chat run today without sort of trying to stay up with every question as it comes in. If you really want me to answer your question, to stop what I'm talking about and answer a question that you have that's a burning issue for you, do a super chat or something, and those will get my attention. Otherwise, I think I'm just going to let the stream run. Because the problem is this topic, unlike job interview questions, this topic, you can't sort of explain an entire topic in a minute. You know, it takes a bit of setup. So when I've tried to do that kind of stuff before, I get interrupted, and because you'd be coming back and forth with questions. So anyway, I guess the place to start is, what is leadership? And I know that sounds so incredibly boring. Let's take a look, okay? Let's see if we can do this together. I haven't done any sort of preparation for this, but let's just see if we can start this off by looking online and see what people say. So what is leadership? Whoops, you like that? My typing is great this morning. Leadership. Okay, and I'm doing this because I want to see what people are saying. Usually what they say is just absolute garbage. You know, people use the word leadership for just about anything they want to talk about. So, okay, well, we got something from McKinsey and something from Harvard. So that's not the worst beginning. What about this stuff here? What is best definition of leadership? Leadership is a set of behaviors used to help people align their collective direction, execute. Yeah, that's not the greatest definition of leadership. I guess that's where we'll begin. What the hell is leadership? Okay, so here's how it works technically, okay? If you're going to be a leader in a business context, when you go to business school and they train you in management, okay? So you're taking a business degree, a bachelor degree, or you're taking an MBA. This is what they say management is, okay? If you're a manager, what exactly is a manager? Manager is someone who does 4 things, okay? Planning, organizing, influencing, and controlling. Very simple. Hopefully everybody understands what those mean already, right? Planning is, you make a plan, you set out your goals, okay? you can't just sort of write down a to-do list of what you're going to do that day. In order to know what to do, you need to have a goal. So the first thing is to set goals. That's planning. Here's what the objective is. Here's how we're going to get there. Okay? That's planning. Organizing. Organizing that's where you collect resources and you match them to the plan. So if you've made a roadmap of how you're going to accomplish your objective, organizing is providing for all the resources you're going to need. You're going to need people. You're going to need talent. You're going to need raw materials. You're going to need time. You're going to need facilities, etc. Okay, so that's organizing. Anything to do with organizing, like getting the org chart in place, things like this. That's organizing. Okay, influencing. That's what we're going to talk about today. To be a manager, one of the functions of manager is you have to get other people to do as you would have them do. Okay, to behave as you would have them behave. And what that means is things like accomplishing the tasks that you've set out for them to do. Okay. And then the way they do it is very important too. Okay. Obviously, you want them to enjoy what they do to a certain degree. You don't want them to quit. You don't want them to be lazy. You want them to accomplish or to finish their task in the quickest possible time while simultaneously being safe. All that kind of stuff. That's influencing. How do you get them to do this? Okay. And another name for influencing, really, for all practical purposes, is leadership. Okay, so leadership is one of the four functions of managers. The fourth function, by the way, is controlling. That's where it's the opposite of planning. That's where you take a look at how your plan's going, how the execution's going, and then you make corrections. Okay, so those are the four management functions: planning, organizing, influencing, and controlling. And what we're talking about today, leadership, is really that third function, influencing. Okay, that's what a leader is, someone who has influence over others. Okay, now that can be in the sense that they're issuing orders and people carry them out. Okay, you're influencing other people. Or it could include things like inspiration, where somebody sees you and they go, ooh, I want to be like that. Or that person thinks this is a good idea, so I'm going to take that into consideration, right? In all these cases, you're exerting some kind of influence. So that's what leadership is. It's that third management function. And if you want to accomplish any goal and you're in charge, part of what you have to do is exert influence. So you have to be a leader. That's what that means technically. Okay. Now, this is strikingly at odds with a lot of what people say leadership is in the popular media, right? When you look at what is leadership, and a lot of people talk about all kinds of altruistic type things, how you can be an inspirational person and how you can accomplish your goals and stuff, and how you can be a good person. And, I'm not knocking any of that stuff, but that's not really what leadership is. Leadership is influencing others. The big question, of course, is who are you leading, right? When people say, well, how to be a leader? Well, you have to be a good person. You have to embrace change, and you have to, do all these things. It's like, okay, great. That sounds nice enough, but who are you leading, right? If you're not leading anyone, it's not leadership. Okay, there's a difference between doing good things in your life and being a leader, right? For you to be a leader, there has to be other people involved. Okay, so let me just take a look at some of these things here. What are some? Oh, here's a good one. Here's a great one to start to talk about here. What are some qualities of an effective leader? Okay, this is not very big. Let's see if I can make this bigger here. Okay, hopefully everybody can see this. Okay, this is a question that people never tire talking about on the internet, I've noticed. What are some qualities of an effective leader? What qualities should you have? And this says there are several qualities of a good leader. Among them include the ability to motivate individuals, a willingness to listen, being trustworthy, having competence, decisiveness, good communication skills, selflessly understanding the goals of a team and organization. Okay, here is the first kind of thing I'm going to say today, and that is when they tell you these are the traits you should have to be a leader, or these are some of the behaviors you should have to be a leader, they're wrong. They're false. Misinformation, okay? See, what happened was, back in the 1950s, okay, the people that study these things, academics, okay, people with PhDs. In this case, PhDs in the social sciences. So people with PhDs in business, people with PhDs in psychology, sociology, things like this, anthropology. They all got together and they were originally trying to test this theory, this thing that people would repeat. And that was what they figured, that leaders were born rather than being made. That means some people were natural leaders and other people weren't. Okay, that was kind of the conventional wisdom in the 1950s and earlier, right? You know, some people just seemed like they were leaders, right? Because they were loud or they were tall or they were confident, or, you know, insert whatever trait that, you know, maybe leaps to mind when you think of a leader, right? Self-assured, good-looking, right? You know, whatever trait it is. So they studied this. They studied this extensively with data, okay, looking at countless case studies of leaders and their effect and what made them a leader. And originally what they were trying to do is they were trying to make a list of the essential qualities or traits that these leaders had, because they were trying to compile, like, you know, here are the qualities of a leader. If you want to be a leader, you have to have these, right? Now, what they found was they found something they weren't actually expecting. Okay, what they found was that, you know, just when you think you've pinned down a list of traits or qualities that you need to be a leader, you find a very high-profile example of a leader, an indisputable leader, who is still a leader, but he or she doesn't have that trait. So that trait, therefore, can't be essential if you want to be a leader. Now, they kept doing this, and what they found was there were no traits that were essential to be a leader. Okay, because just when you think you've got it pinned down, you find an example where someone doesn't. Now, I've talked about this in the past. I know a couple of examples off the top of my head. I don't know all of them, but like, for example, let's say someone says, okay, well, in order to be a leader, you have to be very, very good looking. Okay. And the example I always say is, well, what about Winston Churchill? Winston Churchill was famously not good looking. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of other examples of that. And then someone might say, well, okay, well, to be a leader, then you have to be very loud and extrovert and aggressive. And then you point to someone like Gandhi. And well, Gandhi wasn't loud or extrovert, you know, or forceful. He wasn't. So, okay, so that can't be essential either. Well, what about somebody very tall and very cool and good looking? Right? Well, then you look at people like Bill Gates. Bill Gates is not tall, particularly, or certainly not good looking, certainly not cool. Right? So, I mean, there you go. You're disproving each of the things that people would point to when they say, what are the traits of a leader? I mean, there's more. What about having, like, you know, high emotional intelligence? You know, you look at someone like Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin is a leader within the autistic community, among others. And, you know, they made movies about her and stuff. I mean, obviously you don't need that. She disproves that. So there are no essential traits of leaders. This is what they discovered back in the 1950s. With data, they proved this. So what was the conclusion? The conclusion was that leaders are not born. It's not based on having certain traits, okay? Leaders are made. That means that because there is no list of traits or elements that you need, anybody can be a leader. And when you think about it, this actually makes sense, because being a leader also depends highly on who you're leading, right? You know, what qualities do people care about? What do they find inspirational? What do they relate to? What do they regard as a good thing? That's going to change depending on who your followers are, essentially, right? Okay, so this is what they found. This is you know, you don't have to take my word for this. If this is like a shock to you and this is you know, shaking your world or something, you can easily corroborate this and go and verify this. This is what they found in management science. Leaders are not born; they are made. And if you go further, basically what that says is that anybody, regardless of who they are, has potential to be a leader, because it doesn't depend on, the traits that you were born with. It depends on, what you do, right? So anybody can be a leader. Anybody can exert influence over others if you know what you're doing. Okay? And this is all based on case studies. Now, I'm not an academic. I'm not, I kind of understand these principles, but I don't dwell on the academic side of it, having to prove them or disprove them. I just take the knowledge and I run with it. Okay? So this is the great thing. And I mean, this kind of is intuitive. It's based on what you see. If you had a department full of introverted, detail-oriented engineer types, okay, maybe people that do coding, they do, computer programming. Obviously, those people are going to look up to someone a little bit different, perhaps, than if you had a team of middle-aged, extroverted, traveling salespeople, like outside salespeople, road warriors, right? The person that they are going to listen to and be influenced by and find inspirational is going to be different than the group of introverted developers, right? This is kind of intuitive. You can see why someone like Bill Gates would be, an inspirational type person. Okay, people are not attracted by his personality or how cool he is or how good looking he is or his confidence. They're more attracted by his accomplishments, what he managed to do. And people say like, this person managed to do this, and a lot of others go, wow, I'd better pay attention. All right. So that's kind of how this stuff works. There is no definitive list of traits of leaders. Just when you think you've got it pinned down, you find that one of those things, if not all of them, in fact, are non-essential. Even something like, okay, you have self-control. Okay, you would think like, okay, having self-control is more or less a universal good trait, right? Having a lack of self-control, it's hard to sort of envision a situation where that would be a good thing, right? But if you are the type of person that has a lack of self-control, can you be an effective leader? What management science says is yes, you can be. Doesn't mean you necessarily will be, but you can be. And I'm sure if we think hard enough, we could find an example of a leader who flies off the handle a lot, and people don't care because they're who they are. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, General Patton or something. Who would be an example of a leader that flies off the handle a lot? They don't have a lot of self-control, but yet people look up to them. A lot of people look up to them. I'm sure we can find an example. Okay. Intelligence. A leader should be very intelligent, right? That seems like a universal good trait, being intelligent. Can you think of a leader that's not particularly intelligent? Maybe they're below average with intelligence. I don't know. I can't think of one off the top of my head. Forrest Gump, I don't know. But I'm sure there will be. Okay, this is what management science is telling us. So I'm taking it to extremes, but hopefully everybody understands the idea. Okay, so for a start, when you go on the internet and you're looking at like what are traits, what are the essential traits of, I guess, leaders, something like that. Because I mean, this is what I see so many articles about. I see so many people talking about, when they say, "Well, you need to have this. You have to have integrity, self-awareness." Did President Trump have integrity? I don't know. I think you could still argue that he was a leader to a lot of people, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, just when you think of like all this stuff, courageous, respect, empathy. How much empathy does Bill Gates have for people? Does he look like he's like really that sort of touchy-feely, emotional type person? I don't know. Gratitude. I mean, there are some people that say that a sign of strength is not to show gratitude. I mean, I've heard that. I've heard all kinds of things. So it just gives you an idea, hopefully, about how this stuff works. So that's kind of the first thing. Leaders are not born. It doesn't matter what traits you have. You could be an introvert. You could be totally shy talking to people. You can't do public speaking. And then you think, oh my God, I could never be a manager. I could never be a leader, or regarded as a leader by anyone. Incorrect. Maybe there's a hell of a lot of people out there that share some of those traits. For example, they wouldn't consider it a huge problem. They'd actually consider it maybe a good thing. It's like, wow, that person is just like me. And if there's other reasons why you would be a leader, maybe you've accomplished something that not many people can accomplish, people would look up to you, right? So anyway, these are all facets of this. Okay. So that's kind of the first thing. I feel like I'm dispelling a fallacy. I mean, regardless of what I say, people are going to keep talking about this stuff like it's a thing. It's not. But hopefully you guys will know the difference. And as I say, listen, don't take my word for anything. Go out and corroborate everything I'm saying. Okay? So yeah, that's kind of the first kind of part of it. Now, how to be a leader? Okay? How would you actually do this if you were coming out of the clouds for a second, coming back down to, some practical advice for people that maybe you're interested in getting a management position or a higher management position, like a director position where you're managing managers. I don't know if anyone here is into that, but yeah, what are some traits for that? Now, I gotta say, the first kind of thing, by the way, that people respect, in interviews for management positions is not necessarily like, how you have different traits. It's your accomplishments. Okay, if you've achieved something, people will regard you as a leader. And what they mean by that, is that you're an authority. Okay, you see how we're sort of mixing words up here? We're talking about leadership, but they're talking about an authority in something. And the assumption is that if you're an authority in something, you know how to do something, you could teach others and direct others, right? That's the assumption a lot of people make. Not always true. A lot of times it's not true. Just because you've done something doesn't mean that you'd be a great leader that would be able to direct others efficiently and be able to communicate effectively and maybe even be able to inspire others to a degree, at least in the degree that they don't want to quit their job because they got to deal with you, right? Not always the case, okay? There's a difference between leadership, right, being able to direct and influence people, and knowing how to do something, right? You could be a coder, you could be a developer, you could have written an app in your basement, right? You published it. It was technically brilliant. It succeeded in a business sense. You made some money from it. And so maybe based on that, you are now trying to get a job, or you're trying to put yourself forward as a candidate to be in some management position at a software company. You could say, I could lead this division. I could lead the operations department because, hey, I've built a successful app. Right? That's usually how this stuff goes. If you're trying to convince somebody that you can be a leader and they don't know you, it's not like they've worked with you for years or anything. Okay, they don't know you. This could be a job interview. This could be a recruiter. This could be the owner of another company, owner of the software company, whatever. You're trying to convince them that you're a leader, right? A lot of times in the real world, the way you basically accomplish that is it's not really about your leadership skills. It's about your accomplishments. So that kind of, that in a way, that makes this whole topic moot. I was going to say mute. It makes it mute, right? So there you go. I mean, that's how these things work out. I'm trying my best to ignore the chat, by the way. It's my instinct to look over and try and keep up with the questions, but I'm trying not to do that today. As I said, if there's something super important you want me to address, do a super chat. Otherwise, I'm just going to get through some of these topics I had here. Yeah, so that's usually how that stuff works out in the real world. Okay, so people mistake accomplishments for being a good leader. Here we're talking about actual leadership. Okay, the ability to influence others, the ability to influence others in the way that you would have them behave. Right? That's what it's all about. Because think about a management type job. Okay, to a degree, you set the rules, you set the objectives, And an integral part of that is controlling people's behavior, directing people's behavior. Okay, that's what the leadership part is. Now, what behaviors do you want? Well, for a start, you want people to not quit, right? Okay, that's the first most basic thing. Secondly, you want them to listen to you when you give them instructions, right? That'll be another behavior we want. Okay. Thirdly, we want them to take your instructions seriously, right? And it goes on. What other behaviors do you want? Maybe you want them to come to you if they're experiencing an issue. To a degree, do you want them to come to you with every little tiny issue or question they had? Maybe not. But anything big? Certainly. We want them to be able to come to you and be able to deliver bad news without being afraid. It's a matter of thinking through all those behaviors, right? So leadership is the ability to be able to get those behaviors from your team. And some of it will jive with what they say on the internet, about being very altruistic, supporting people, helping them learn, all that kind of stuff. It's important, in as much as it serves the objective. Okay, you want to encourage your employees. You don't want them to leave. You want them to be happy. You want them to be enthusiastic. So part of it is encouraging that kind of stuff. But let's face it, let's be practical. Let's talk about the realities of this. The realities are that if you're a manager, you're not in this to sort of be the servant of your employees necessarily and have them be successful in life and their careers. I mean, obviously, that's part of being a good person. But as part of the job, that doesn't really play part of the job. Part of the job is to accomplish the objectives. That's what the job is. If you're a manager or you're an executive, your job is to make money. Your job is to make money usually for somebody else. That's what you do as a CEO. You make money for somebody else. You're somebody else's representative, the owner or the owners. Right? You try and help your employees when you can. But let's be honest, it's not all about just being, some kind of guru or saint for everybody else and living entirely for them. You've got your work to accomplish and you've got your goals and your employees are going to help you in those goals. And usually they're paid pretty good, or hopefully they are. So yes, that's what leadership is. Okay. Now, what can you do to be a leader? Okay, that's what I think a lot of people are wondering, right? There's 32 of you guys here. Thank you for being here. You're awesome. We're going to do some self-improvement. And it never hurts to learn this stuff properly, okay? Don't get your information from the internet, from internet articles. Go to the source. Go to like textbooks. I mean, seriously. Textbooks on leadership, anybody can read it, okay? If you've gone through the 9th grade, you could probably read any textbook on leadership that's used in academic circles. If you want to know if something's good, go to the website of your local university. Go look at the business program that they're teaching. That people pay thousands of dollars to read to enroll in, and a lot of times they'll post the textbooks publicly, so you can just log in. You can see what textbooks they're using. Right? Go and get that textbook. You can usually get it used on Amazon for like sometimes $5 and then have it shipped to you and then just read it or at least skim it. Easy way to get high quality information. It's valid. It's not written by some amateur. It's not a coffee table book you buy at, Amazon or Indigo. Like, what are the bookstores? Indigo. Do we even have bookstores anymore? Chapters. There used to be a whole bunch of them. If you're in Britain, I remember W.H. Smith. W.H. Smith, they were a good bookstore. Anyway. But yeah, that's how you can learn some of this stuff, and you get it right from the source. Okay? It's not some pseudo-science, pseudo-knowledge that's being passed around the internet. It's actually legitimate. Okay? I highly encourage people to do that. I keep staring at this browser window of what a good leader is that we've just debunked. I need to stop doing that. But some traits, okay? So here is at least my method. Am I an absolute expert on leadership? No. I have done some stuff. I have been in an executive management role. I have been a CEO. But this is what I would say, okay? Let's say you've just been hired in your first management position, okay? You are a manager. You've never been a manager before. You have a team of, say, 8 people, and you're in charge of them, okay? You've got to get these people to work. They have to accomplish goals. They have to meet deadlines. They have quality standards that they have to meet, and so on, right? You didn't hire these people. You inherited them. That's always a tougher situation. It's much, much better when you can hire your team. You can assemble your team. But a lot of times, as most people know, that's not usually what we encounter. Usually you inherit your team. They're already there, and then they hired you, and now you're the boss, right? It's a wonderful situation to walk into. Makes every normal person feel like an imposter. Okay? So if you feel that and you're in that situation, you're normal. That's how it goes. Okay? But there's a few things you can do. Okay? Number one difference you're going to notice between being a worker and being a manager of some kind, like a supervisor or a manager or a director, is communication. Okay, there's going to be a lot more emphasis on communication. Get used to talking to people. Get used to talking to people a lot, and get used to saying the same thing over and over and over again. Okay, you're going to need to say it over and over again as you communicate it to different people. You're also going to need to say it over and over again to communicate it to the same people. Okay, especially you introverts out there, you technical people. One of the hardest things that I learned in the world of leadership was, when I was younger, I figured like, okay, I got to tell people once and then they get it and then I don't have to keep repeating myself. Incorrect. One of the first things you're going to learn in your first management role is that you got to keep repeating the same thing over and over again to the same people. I don't care how good they are. I don't care how diligent they are or attentive. You have to just keep saying the same things over and over again, okay? Until they get it and it sticks. Oh man, I forgot to take cold medication again. I still got a bit of a cough. Excuse me. That's the first thing you're going to learn. In theory, you shouldn't have to repeat yourself, especially if you have good people. They will hear you the first time. They'll pay attention. They will understand, and they will intuitively fill in the blanks that you're not explicitly stating. Okay? In a perfect world, in theory, that's how it should work. In reality, it doesn't work like that. Sometimes people just don't get the message. Okay? Number one. Number two, when they do get the message, they didn't hear correctly, or it didn't sink in for whatever reason. And then even if they did hear and it did sink in, they didn't fully understand what you meant. Okay? The way we communicate, it's not possible to explicitly state absolutely everything. Lawyers try and do that. When, I think being a lawyer, in a sense, is kind of a great, great skill because you really understand precise language that cannot be misinterpreted. I think that's great. I would love to have that. I'm not a lawyer, but I can recognize the value of that. But then again, people don't talk like lawyers. That's just not how people do things in the real world. And if you had to conduct all your business as if you were a lawyer, things would slow down. Let's put it that way. Okay. So a lot of what we say is implied, right? When I say, okay, I need you to do this by Friday, a lot of times I will just assume that you know how to do that, right? And you know how to do it in the way that I'm referring to, the way that I'm referring to doing it, not some other way, right? So you see, we're not really explicitly stating everything. So a lot of what our communication is implied. So this is one of the problems, because even if someone receives the message, their understanding of it, their decoding of that message may not convey the original meaning. There might be a miscommunication, right? So for all these reasons, you have to keep communicating over and over again. You can't just have one conversation or one message. Okay, so number one, get used to that. That's the biggest thing you're going to learn. In fact, if you get to be an executive, if you are an executive now or you will be an executive in the future, you're going to realize a huge part of your job is communicating. right? If you're coordinating sort of a large team of people working on one project, okay, or one process, just being able to keep everyone on the same page, you're running around and sort of communicating to everybody and making sure everybody understands and answering questions and, having to do it over and over again. It's a huge part of your job. So you may have come up from a technical role. You might have been when you were a worker, you might have been in a technical role, but you get promoted to being the manager of that department. You find that all of a sudden you've got to do all this communication. This is not what you're known for. It's not why you were promoted. You were promoted because you were a very good technical person, right? But now you're in a leadership role or in a management type role. It's all about communication. It's all about talking to people, right? You get a lot of technical leaders that will send out emails to everybody. Here's the big long 3-page email of instructions. There you go. I did my job. Now just do it. And then they're surprised when they still get questions. They still get people that didn't understand. They still get people that didn't get the message. And then they get upset. And then that's when you get problems. Okay, so number one, get used to a lot of communicating. Okay, learn good ways of communicating. If you have to deliver bad news, what's the way to deliver it? What words do you say? Right? You don't want people to get offended. You don't want people to get upset, to take things a lot harder than they should, because maybe you phrased it in a very blunt and abrupt kind of way, an overly harsh way, right? So learning good communication in that sense. Also, learning what channel to communicate over. If you've got bad news to deliver, how should you deliver that message? Should it be an email? Should it be an announcement to the entire group? Should it be a one-to-one, face-to-face kind of meeting in private? How do you do it? Right? And how do you get people to communicate with you? Get that feedback. Right? Everything isn't always a briefing. A lot of times it's going to be a debriefing. Right? You're going to have to get information back from them. How are things going? Are you having any issues? Do you have any questions? Do you have any problems? Is there an issue with coordinating other resources that I can help you out with? Et cetera, right? Sometimes people don't want to bring that up to you, especially if you're the type of person that tends to bite people's heads off, right? They're not going to want to bring up bad news to you. If you're the type of person that flies off the handle whenever you get bad news, that's not a good thing. People will stop giving you bad news and they'll just sweep it under the carpet. So that kind of stuff. Now, a lot of you guys, I'm sure I'm talking to a good cross section of people here. There's 30 people here. You guys are awesome. I'm sure that we got introverts, extroverts. We got people with a lot of self-control, that are very laid back. And then we got some people that are pretty intense, very detail-oriented people that are very, very intense, right? Okay. For those people, the latter group, if you're very intense, one of your biggest challenges is probably going to be just having some patience when people come and tell you they don't understand, or people come and tell you that they're having an issue. If immediately your face changes, and you look visibly angry, that's going to be a problem. Most people will not want to approach you if that's how you do things. So all these different forms of communication, like nonverbal, all that kind of stuff. Communication is the key to being a manager, and particularly to being the influencing function, which we call leadership. It's going to be a big part of it. Okay. How can you influence somebody? Well, you can influence somebody through your actions, right? If they observe you doing something, that can send a message, right? They can get something from that. But usually it's in the form of explicit communication. You go and talk to people, right? Best way of talking to people is one-on-one. It's the most time-consuming, it's the most inefficient, but it's the most effective. So if you have a small team, say 8 people, You want all of them to like you. You want all of them to want to work for you. You want all of them to understand 100% what their instructions are and why they're being asked to do it. Okay? The best way is one-on-one, face-to-face communication in private. That's the best way to do it. Okay? Can't always do all your communication like that. You're going to talk to the group. But after you give out, say, general instructions to a group, you ask questions or answer questions in public, then it's always good to have one-on-ones with everybody. Okay? And really try and get them to give you some feedback, to be able to speak freely with you. Okay? Very important. Okay? It doesn't mean you have to just grant every request. It may not be possible to grant every request, but at least, you want to have that one-on-one, face-to-face communication as often as you can. Very important. When I was an executive, what I would do is for every one of my direct reports, I would devote 1 hour a week. Was it 1 hour or half an hour? I can't remember. I think it was officially half an hour, but it would spill over. It would go longer. But with each of my direct reports, and it would be in my office. You close the door, one-on-one, and it would be a two-way communication. I basically communicate to them. They communicate to me. They tell me what's going on. What's up? How are things going? If they have questions, they have concerns. If they need explanations about why we have to do something a certain way because they don't understand. What's the point of this? Why do we have to have it done by Friday? It's a hell of a lot of work. Why do we have to do this? You can explain to them. If they have any issues, any personal issues, or just, problems, something like that, concerns, questions, you have the opportunity to answer those directly. Okay? And a couple of points about that, if possible, depending on what position you're in. Don't defer those, because it also signals respect when you book a meeting with somebody and you keep it, right? You don't keep bumping it, right? I'm sure everybody's had that, where you try and talk to the boss, right? But your priority Z 250 to the boss, so they keep bumping your meeting, rescheduling and rescheduling and rescheduling. It's a signal of, almost disrespect. At least that's how it's interpreted. I'm unimportant to you. Everything is more important than talking to me, so I'm your last priority, right? You don't want to do that. You want to book the meetings and keep the meetings. Very important. I don't really have any notes for this. I'm just sort of winging this. But yeah, basically, okay, how to be a leader, how to be a manager, how to influence people in the context of a career in business or in management. Number one, make sure everybody understands the rules. Make sure everybody understands the instructions. Okay, it's very important. Make sure everybody understands the penalties for violating the rules, for the important rules, right? Not everything is going to have a penalty associated with it, but, for the really important stuff, make sure everybody understands, what the rules are and what the penalties are. Okay, very important. And be very friendly and approachable as a sort of default. Okay. The problem with this is that it encourages people to come and talk to you, which is a good thing. But sometimes, people come and talk to you about trivialities and it takes up your time. Right? Now, what some people do to sort of counteract that is they try and be a bit more aloof and less approachable because they don't want everyone to come with them with all their personal problems and all this trivial stuff that doesn't really matter. It just takes up time, right? So they solve that problem by backing off on the approachable thing. In my opinion, that's not very good. You've got to take the good with the bad. It's better to be approachable and have everybody feel they can speak to you freely, because then they will tell you what's actually going on. The trade-off is that then you get a bunch of trivialities, which doesn't really matter. They didn't really need to talk to you about that. It wasn't super important, but it consumes a lot of your time. You have to accept that, in my opinion. In my experience, that just comes with it. Because if you do the opposite, you try and not be approachable, then that can work out far worse. People don't waste your time, but then they don't really tell you what's going on, and that's going to be an issue, okay? You got to have a lot of patience. That's very important. And the other part of this is this. I mean, this is more about being a manager than being a leader, but it still is part of leadership. In my opinion, you have to enforce the penalties. If you're clear about what the rules are, everybody understands. You're clear about what the penalties are, everybody understands. Somebody violates something, you have to impose the penalty. You can't just say, oh, well, don't worry about it, because that causes more harm than good. It's short-term gain for long-term disaster if you do that. Okay? You want to be fair, you want to be open, but you do what you say you're going to do. And if there are penalties for violating certain rules, then you have to enforce those. That's just how it goes. If you can't enforce anything, then everything just erodes, right? Now, you might encounter this if you've ever been a supervisor. Usually a supervisor, in a lot of contexts, one of the things you're going to do is you're going to make sure people are working when they're supposed to be working, right? If quitting time is, 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., whatever it is, let's say it's 5 p.m., and you're in charge of supervising a team or a gang or, a group of people. They're supposed to be working up until, say, 10 to 5, right? That's kind of the accepted time when you can start shutting down, closing down your workstation, whatever people are doing, and get ready to go home. They don't actually leave the property until after 5 p.m., but you can stop working, say, 10 to 5, something like that, right? Just whatever the rules are in that particular situation. So as a supervisor, you have to enforce these rules. Now, if you've ever been a supervisor, you know that, if you're super nice, you want to be nice and accommodating. You don't want to be a real jackass. People start putting their stuff away at 4:45. Then that turns into 20 to 5. Then they start goofing around and hanging out and talking to each other and not working when they're supposed to be working. And you don't want to be a hard ass about it. You don't want to be a jerk, so you don't enforce the rules. It just erodes even further, right? And then pretty soon, you're not really a very good leader because you're not reinforcing the behaviors that you need at work, right? You've been given the job. You've been told you have to make sure people are working up until 10 to 5. And, it's like, okay, 1 or 2 minutes, whatever, that's fine. But come on, if they're stopping at 4:30, that's a problem. Okay? People are going to push and push and push. You're not going to be a total hard ass about it, but you've got to enforce the rules. So that's why it is important to be able to enforce penalties. Okay? And as long as it's clear, as long as, if people see that, you follow the rules and you're very open and upfront about it, it's like, people have got to work until this time. If I see you not working, unfortunately, this is what I got to do. Okay? Those are the rules that I got to follow. Right? People see you doing what you say you're going to do. It's all above board. It makes sense. The vast majority of people will respect that. Okay? It's not all about penalties. A lot of times it's about rewards too. As much as you possibly can, give out rewards. When somebody goes above and beyond, you give them a reward, even if it's simply just a commendation. Right? You go up to that worker, you say like, hey, I noticed how you did all this extra work the other day. We didn't even ask you or make you do that. You went ahead and did that. That's awesome. You're a great worker. I wish more people were like you. Way to go. Just something like that. Especially if it's done publicly, other people can see them getting recognized like that. It sort of does everyone's ego a bit of good to, do that stuff. And in a perfect world, all you'd have to do would be give out rewards and no punishments. Okay. In a perfect world, we do that. We shoot for that. And, hopefully we get most of the way there. Depending where you work, though, may not be possible. So that's what I'd say about that. Wow, there's 26 of you guys here just listening to my mindless, endless rambling. I don't know where this is going. I haven't prepared for this. I'm just talking off the top of my head. Usually about stuff that I dealt with years ago. But thank you for being here. It's very flattering. Hopefully you're getting something out of this. Yeah, so that's basically kind of the essentials of how to be a leader, okay? Lots of communication, clear, concise communication. Be very clear about what the rules are. Be very clear about what your expectations are, okay? Sometimes you have to go into the mechanism for why you have those expectations. Because people are going to naturally wonder, like, if it doesn't make sense to them, they're going to say, well, why do we have to do that? You have to explain the principle, explain where it comes from. Okay, so lots of communication. You got to be patient. You got to recognize that you got to say the same thing over and over and over again for various different reasons and get used to it. Okay? A lot of your day is going to be taken up with that. Right? And it's two-way communication. So it's not all from you down to your team. A lot of it's going to come from the team to you. Okay, and this is what you want. It's a good thing. Don't think that like, oh, this is a distraction taking away from the time I have to do technical work. No, this is the work of influencing, of being a leader, of directing a team. Okay? In fact, that's what I tried to do the most of, do a lot of delegation. Okay? A lot of things tend to bottleneck through the boss. That's what we see a lot of times, especially people that never went to business school. A lot of things bottleneck through the boss because the boss is trying to do it all. They don't really trust their team to handle a lot of the technical work because they're the senior technical person. They think I can do it better than anyone. So the really important stuff, they hoard it for themselves. I'm going to do this job because this job is really important. It's high profile. So I'm going to take care of that one, right? Instead of trusting their team for them to do it. They're the ones that are there to do the work. Right? And you're basically the referee. You're the traffic control. You're the one that sort of supervises and makes sure it's done and allocates resources and puts out fires and that kind of stuff. Okay? And makes sure everyone is pulling in the same direction. That's your job as the manager. Okay? So don't be that type of micromanaging boss if that's what the cards hold for you in your career path. Recognize that, yes, you are the technical authority, but these people on your team, they're the ones that are here to do the work. And there's 8 of them and there's 1 of you. Okay, so you need to utilize them and you need to trust them. And if you can't trust them for whatever reason, that's something you got to address. Okay, what you want is to be able to give them all the work and trust that they know what they're doing and that they'll do a good job. Right? If that's not the case, then you got some work to do. Maybe they need training. Maybe they need some other sort of coaching that you need to go in there and do or resolve some issues. Okay, that's your job. Delegate the work and don't require as much as possible. Sometimes it's not always possible to control this, especially if you're lower down in a big organization. But as much as possible, you want them to be able to just do their jobs and you are there to assist. You are there to allocate resources, clarify things, that kind of thing. Okay, so be approachable. Get used to the idea of a lot of communication. Enforce penalties when you need to enforce them. When you've stated clearly what the rules are, what the penalties are, enforce them. Now, I've talked about this before. I think I did a video a long time ago on this channel when I was sort of doing videos on a variety of different topics. I talked about somebody called Ernest Shackleton, who is somebody that's basically been forgotten about. He was one of these polar explorers. He was British about 100 years ago, something like that, maybe a bit more. And, he discovered some stuff in Antarctica or whatever. But one of the reasons why he's still remembered today is because he was sort of way ahead of his time when it came to people management. There was a very famous incident where he had planned to do an expedition to go across the Antarctic. And this is Like, as I say, this is over 100 years ago. This is when it was like extremely dangerous to do this, and hardly anybody had done it. And they were going to sail the Antarctic Sea with these wooden ships, right? Anyway, something went wrong. His ship got trapped in the ice. He had a crew of people with him. I don't know, 30, 40, 50, something like that. And he was the captain of the ship and the leader of the expedition. And their ship got trapped in the ice and then crushed by the ice, in the Antarctic Ocean. And he had to save all these people. He was in charge, and all these people were his crew. And he managed to save every single person in that expedition against disease, against cold, against exposure, against being lost. And he undertook some kind of journey where he sailed the ocean, like the Antarctic Ocean, in a rowboat with 2 other people to go and try and get help. And eventually he did. He had to climb over mountains, and then they eventually got to a settlement, and they got help, and they were rescued because of him. But the way he inspired his crew, he was a strict disciplinarian, but also he was very, very warm and attentive and inspirational as a person, really combining a lot of great sort of traits. And he was totally ahead of the curve on how to manage people. A lot of 20th century and 21st century ideas that he embodied, like when no one had ever heard of this stuff, really. So in some management circles, and in terms of the leadership studies, they still pay attention to Ernest Shackleton, great sort of person that embodied a lot of these. Very inspirational kind of example. So, I mean, a lot of what I'm saying is not all these recommendations stuff. They're not coming from me. They're coming from, other people throughout history. And I've had a couple of really good mentors in my life, people that I've observed who were very, very effective leaders. And one person was the owner of a company I worked for. And I learned so much from him, very inspirational. And a couple other people along the way. I've also seen a lot of bad examples. Holy crap, have I ever seen some really bad examples. I'm sure everybody here has seen some really bad examples of just bad managers, bad leaders. I mean, they're so off-putting. Not only do they not inspire you to do your best work, they push you so far in the other direction. You just want to, maybe they're the inspiration why you quit a job. It doesn't matter how much money you're going to pay me. If I got to deal with you, no dice, deal breaker. I'm sure everybody could tell stories about that. I should ask a question like that in one of the polls I do, just see if people will share their stories. But yeah, that's where a lot of these principles come from. That sort of management theory that you would learn in an MBA, plus a few real life examples, plus a few famous case studies from history, stuff like that. The other thing that people quote for leadership is Sun Tzu's Art of War. Have you ever seen that? People that there's kind of 2 things that I see over and over again. I see people that make sports analogies to leadership. A lot of Americans that will talk about leadership like it's like they're a coach at a football game, coaching a football team, and they use all these football references. Hey, I guess it works for some. For me, I'm not really into football, so I don't know a lot of the expressions. But I've seen that a lot. And the other thing I've seen is Sun Tzu's Art of War, right? That used in a management context. And some of the principles apply, certainly, but not all of them, because employees are not soldiers. Soldiers are people that, like, once you're in the army and you're in war, it's a different situation from being an employee. An employee can quit. You can voluntarily leave. You have the freedom to do that. You don't have to just accept whatever treatment, So it's not quite the same thing. There are a few principles there. But I'm a bit skeptical of people that sort of use too many football analogies or sports analogies, or that use too much analogies to Sun Tzu's Art of War. I think that, you can't like adapt the entire thing to business. It doesn't work. Okay, so far, let's see. We've talked about the traits of leaders. Are leaders born or made? We've covered that. Okay, we've covered a lot of fallacies that you're probably going to encounter everywhere on the internet, in articles and posts. We talked about just some practical tips to how to be an effective leader. Okay, and this is in the context of business. So if you get a job as a supervisor or as a manager or a director, like a manager of managers, okay, or an executive of any other kind, same thing applies. Okay, we talked about some of those. The last thing I'd want to cover is job interview questions related to leadership, the most important of which is that cliched question, what is your leadership style? Okay, now I got to confess, I'm not sure when recruiters ask this question, like low-level recruiters, I don't know what they're fishing for necessarily. I mean, I can give you the answer to that question, but it sort of takes one to know one. If you're not a leader yourself and you've never done this yourself, how would you be able to recognize a good answer from a bad answer? You wouldn't, right? That's how it occurs to me. So let's talk about that. So a question you may get is, what is your leadership style? Let's pretend that this question is actually coming from someone who knows what they're talking about, okay? From a hiring manager, maybe they're hiring you to be a manager or a director, okay? So you are the manager of a unit, a business unit, or part of a business unit, okay? And they say, what's your leadership style? Well, there's many different answers. I'm sure if we Googled this, we could see a whole kaleidoscope of various answers. But this is what my answer would be, okay? Oh, somebody says endless rambling. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm doing because I have no plan here. But, okay, so the answer to what is your leadership style, this is what I would say. Number one, your leadership style is going to vary depending on what's needed, okay? There's many different leadership styles. I basically learned 4, okay? Let's see if I can remember them off the top of my head. So there's autocratic, like almost like a military leadership style where you just issue orders, just do this, okay? Depending on what industry you're in, that may be the style that everyone just adopts all the time. You know, I used to work in the railroad. I spent 8 years in the railroad industry, and, you know, it was like going back in time 100 years. These people, that's how they did everything. They just ordered people around. Usually it ranged from being very ineffective to somewhat ineffective, but somewhere in that range was the end result. And it was usually done by people that had never received any training whatsoever on talking to people, like no training on business, let alone interacting with people. So just terrible communication skills. But in certain contexts, depending on what's needed, you may have to adopt an autocratic leadership style. If you walk into a situation, nobody knows anything, nobody knows how to do any of their jobs, it's complete chaos. In order to sort it out, you might have to resort to that. It might be what's needed. Okay? The danger in saying that, you know, you have an autocratic leadership style and just leaving it at that is because the assumption is that if that's how you conduct yourself, there'll be a lot of bad things that come out of that. You'll drive away good employees. Okay? You will not listen. You'll not be aware of issues. People won't want to give you accurate feedback or complete feedback, certainly. You're unapproachable. You're abrasive. Things like this. You may not be good at representing the organization publicly, so they wouldn't want to send you to represent the organization in any capacity. Even if it was just like sending a representative to go to an event, like a trade show or something, they wouldn't want to send you. You know, you're not the type of person that, they would want as the public face representing them. Okay, so there's some issues with that. But it's good to be able to say that you can do it when the situation calls for it. Okay, because that's accurate. Another leadership style would be consultative. Okay, what that means is basically you say, the question you're wondering is, what are we going to do? Well, instead of you just making a decision and ordering it done, Instead, you go talk to your team members, the people that are your direct reports, possibly others, and say, what do you think we should do? And you listen, okay? This is done in a sort of one-on-one type context. It's done in private, okay? You get everyone's sort of feedback individually, and then you make a decision, okay? So you are consulting with people, but then you make the decision yourself, okay? So that would be a sort of consultative leadership style. Another style to go even further in that direction would be a participative leadership style. Okay, participate. Oh, before we leave consultative, I just want to say the downside of saying that's your leadership style is that people could make the assumption that you don't really know anything yourself. Okay, you are in over your head. You don't know what should be done in any situation. So all you're doing is you're just asking your subordinates, "What do you think I should do?" And then you're just taking their advice and, without really any critical thinking, and then just doing it. Right? That's what it could signal if you say that alone is your leadership style. Okay, but it's a good thing to be able to do when the situation calls for it. Okay, so. Moving on further in that direction, a participative leadership style. That's a little bit different. That's where you get everybody together. You get everyone together around a table usually, and you throw out the question, okay, everybody, what should we do? And people participate in the decision. So it's all done together. So people not only communicate to you, but they also communicate to each other. And between the entire group, you come up with something that works more or less for everybody. Okay? That's a participative leadership style. In my experience, there are some times when you need that, but not often. Okay? If you work in government or you work in, nonprofits or, whatever, I imagine you'd use that style a lot more. Okay? It's very inclusive. People get to feel part of the decisions. They get to own the decision to some degree. The problem, however, with saying that that's your leadership style and only that is that the assumption is that it could result in groupthink. You've got a lot of yes men, for want of a better word. Everything you do is a decision by committee. It's the lowest common denominator. And it doesn't really satisfy any one person. It's just sort of always a compromise. And there's no overall strategic direction. You're not following any kind of overall strategic plan. You're just, whichever way the wind turns, whichever people want to do in the moment, that's what you're doing. So you don't want to say that's your only leadership style, okay, because it leaves it open to that assumption. And I'm trying to think. What I mentioned earlier, having a delegative leadership style. Okay, that's not really how you make decisions, more or less, but it's how you organize the work, how you do load balancing, and that is where you basically delegate decisions to people below you. Okay, it's kind of the opposite of micromanaging in a sense that you're not stepping in and deciding, looking over somebody's shoulder and deciding how they should do every little tiny thing. If these are decisions that don't really require you, you have faith in the employee that they know what they're doing, okay? You basically say, look, I'm going to leave those details to you, okay? If you want me to get involved, I can certainly get involved, but unless you particularly want me involved in deciding those things, I'm going to leave it up to you. You figure out what works best, and you implement it. And if you're okay doing that, I'm okay doing with that. I have confidence that you will make the right decision. Okay, so sometimes the situation requires that. A lot of times it does, actually, some form of that. Very delegative leadership style. You're not going to try and take on every task yourself and have everything bottlenecked through you. You're going to not require approvals for absolutely everything from all your team members. Right? So getting back to the question, if somebody asks you, what's your leadership style? I would say, well, my leadership style varies depending on what the situation calls for. But 4 styles that I've had to invoke on a regular basis are those 4 things. So, autocratic leadership style, delegative leadership style, consultative leadership style, participative leadership style. Okay, depending on the situation, depending on what I'm walking into. Okay, and then hopefully the advantage of saying more than one thing also convinces people that, you're adaptable. You're not just one thing. And any of the drawbacks of any of those styles are counterbalanced also by the fact that you can switch up your style as the situation demands. So that's what I'd say about that, answering that question. Now, I think it's high time. I'm going to open it up for questions and go to the chat. I see there's quite a few people here. People have been talking and saying stuff. Let's see. What do we got? Okay, so somebody asked at the very beginning, how do you answer, what is your leadership style? I covered that. Okay, I covered it about like an hour after you asked, so I don't know if you're still around, but hopefully you might have been able to get something from it. Hey, Bill, do you think in general, based on the group team makeup, like education and Generation XYZ, require different leadership styles? As a general rule, no. I don't think so. That's just my personal opinion. But it does vary considerably by industry and level. Okay? That has always varied wildly, like widely and wildly. If you are changing careers, you will notice this. You work at a place like I was sort of saying, for example, I worked at the railroad where, everybody, the way people got you to do something was they sort of yelled at you, told you to do it and, talked to you like you were an idiot. And they were very gruff. And then you go and you work in another industry where that's just not the culture. That's not what people do. They are very polite. They ask you to do things. They treat you like a professional and like a consummate expert in your subject area. And, they make requests of you. And very subtle, very kind of polite. And, so, and also their expectations for how you would report back or give an update or, how you would request assistance or anything like that completely varies. So that's what it's going to depend on mainly. I haven't really seen a difference too much in people's age. Mind you, I haven't really had a lot of experience directly with Generation Z if you're in the States. So that's what I'd say about that. Someone says, Bill, hope you are doing well. Leaders aren't made. I believe everyone can be a manager. I believe, yes, they can. I believe the words leader, manager too often mixed up. Exactly, yes, two different things. But the way people usually phrase that, what I've seen, just everywhere, is they'll say leader is a good word, manager is a bad word. It's like, no, manager is not a bad word. Manager is the description of a certain function, right? You have to manage something. It's in your care. You are accountable for it. And it's more than just leading people. Okay, being a manager, right? As we established earlier, you're planning, you're controlling, and you are organizing. These have nothing to do with influencing people. They are just part of that job as a manager. So it's not a bad word. Kind of the layman's sort of definition of those terms. But you are absolutely right, Sebastian. Someone says, I thought there is always place for symbiosis. No symbiosis between employee and employer equals good work. Oh, does not equal good work. Yeah, well, it depends on what you mean by symbiosis. I mean, of course there's symbiosis. I mean, if there's no manager, how will employees know what to do? And if there's no employees, how will the work get done? So, I mean, yes, they do depend on each other. So, yes, there's that level of symbiosis. But I think what you're trying to say is agreement. When you sort of, if as a manager, when you basically give the objective and give orders, essentially, I need you to do this. Okay. If the employee thinks, wow, that's stupid, or they think, oh my God, that's so completely unrealistic, that'll never happen the way you envision it, then obviously there's a lack of shared understanding there, right? So there's actually something within management called management by objectives. It's something that everybody talks about and everybody gets wrong. A lot of people think that's just managers sort of choosing an objective and then ordering people to work towards it. And that's management by objective. That's actually incorrect. Management by objectives, it's that plus something extremely important. It's the manager instructing the workers to achieve an objective, but the objective is mutually agreed upon by both the manager and the workers. Okay? That's the key to it working. The workers have to believe that this objective is realistic, it's doable, it's reasonable. Okay? And the manager also agrees that it's achievable, it's reasonable, it's doable, right? You have to have those two perspectives that both agree on that objective, okay? We're going to do this. Like, for example, you could be running a repair shop. That's sort of my background. And you agree on the amount of work you're going to get done by the end of the day. By the end of the day, we should have this job done, and this job 40% done up to this point, right? The manager says, yep, that's reasonable. I would be happy if we achieved that. That's fair. The workers say, yes, that's reasonable. It's doable. We could do that. We have no problem working towards that, right? So there you go. That's management by objectives. You have that agreement. The challenge, of course, is getting that agreement, getting a goal that both parties agree on, okay? But if you can achieve it, then yes, it tends to work. You tend to accomplish your objective, okay? So if that's kind of what you mean by symbiosis, that's sort of the next level symbiosis where you're in agreement about what you're doing. Yes, that is definitely good. Sebastian says, I think also that there is a kind of Maslow pyramid for, oh yes, of course, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That has been proven that's one of the, it's one of the, of all the stuff they teach in business, in terms of these sort of social science ideas, that are based on psychology or sociology, one might argue not the steadiest foundation for a lot of principles. Something based on psychology or sociology. If you look historically over time, they tend to come back to that stuff after a certain number of decades and then disprove what they had said was, oh, this is absolutely true. But of all of those, I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs is one of the ones that just keeps holding up. You can see it everywhere. You can see it demonstrated case after case after case with every individual. I think it's one of the most sound things of that nature, of all those principles. Someone says there is a lot of difference between a boss and a leader. Well, once again, you see, you're now we're reverting to colloquial definitions of boss and leader. As an employee, I can sacrifice through leader, but not boss. The leader is leader. He should show us the way. Yeah. Sure. That's a leader. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Actually, if that's the definition you want to go with, sure. I mean, technically, a leader is someone who leads, okay? And they accomplish the objective. Okay? If you don't know what I'm talking about, remember, the definition of leader is wide enough to encompass things like in the military, a general who's a leader. Now, you might be a general that got half your soldiers killed, and you're absolutely hated by the rank and file soldiers under you, but you won the battle. Right? So remember, it's not all about, being all touchy-feely with employees. I'm just saying. Now, working in a business for your job is not the same thing as being in the military, obviously. Okay? But I'm just saying, we're talking about leaders. And if you want to be technical about it, which is what we're doing here, a leader is someone who accomplishes the goals and directs everyone to do it. Okay. Hopefully they can do it in terms of inspiration and more positive things. That would obviously be preferable. But at the end of the day, for example, if you get a job as a manager, okay, and you're in charge of a business unit, if you get to that point in your career, if that's a goal of yours, if you would like that job, if you would like that type of work, I mean, some people don't. That's fine. Not a problem. But for some people who do, and they get these roles where they have to be a leader, okay, you can be sure that the number one thing on their mind is to accomplish their business objectives. And if your objective is to meet certain, KPIs or metrics, you have to be profitable, you have to be this efficient, you have to be this effective, you have to, have low customer complaints, but yet, high reliability of your service, whatever. That's what you got to pay attention to. And if you can direct your employees to achieve that, that's kind of priority one. Inspiring people, although, is definitely a very good thing, and it really helps you in the accomplishment of your goals. Depending on what situation you walk into, it may not always be possible, okay? Maybe some people here can relate. I've walked into situations where you've got a unionized workforce whose morale is very, very low, and they are extremely distrustful of management. They are openly hostile to their own employer, their employer, and all the policies that keep getting handed down. And then on the other hand, you've got an extremely unreasonable management that firmly believes that their workforce, all the workers in the unionized workforce, are lazy, and not only lazy, but they are actively working against the interests of the organization. So you're just walking into an absolute, what's the word? Powder cake? Minefield? I'm going to reduce the brightness of my camera a little bit. It looks very bright. And it may not be impossible to inspire people in that particular situation. You walk in, you want to do your best. You don't want to annoy people. You don't want to have horrible relationships with people. You'd like it to go smoothly if possible, but you walk into a situation and there's not really too much you can do to change the nature of the relationships here, because, there's a lot of history and you're just walking into it. So inspiration and all that kind of stuff, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great. And you definitely want to go as far in that direction as you possibly can. But at the end of the day, when we're talking getting a job as a manager, and part of that role is to be a leader, okay, what your bosses are expecting of you is that you will lead the human resources they've provided you with to accomplish the goals. Okay, that's what their expectations are of you. And when they talk about, how good of a leader you are, that's the context in which they're talking about it. Okay, so let's be clear here about what we're talking about. Now, if you work in a nonprofit, you work in like a charity, you do a lot of really amazing humanitarian work. You work with, like homeless people, you work with poor people, you work with people that need help, okay? And that's the organization that you're working in. It's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a lot more of the whole like inspirational kind of thing, right? Where you build on positive reinforcement, stuff like that. You can go a bit further in that direction. And in fact, you need to, because especially when there's like volunteers and stuff involved, that's what their payment is. They don't get, their compensation is usually not monetary. But why do they do it? Because they're compensated in other ways. They get a good feeling at the end of the day. They feel like they made a difference. They feel like if they had somebody that looks at them face to face and thanks them profoundly for making a difference in their lives, that's their payment, And if they have a boss, a manager, that coordinates all their efforts and gets them all pulling in the same direction and, all this kind of stuff, who is very positive and, wants to tap into all those positive vibes and stuff and positive reinforcement, definitely, yes, it'll be even more of a role in that situation, okay? But we're talking careers here. This is what we're talking about, leadership in the context of a career. Where did I leave off here? Okay. The Art of Cass. That's an interesting name. The Art of KAS. That's the secret to my success. I just did the full KAS, and I highly recommend that everyone does it too. Interesting way to mix those words. I found myself very recently moving through being a leader and an authoritative figure. Yeah, well, hopefully you can combine them to be one and the same. You're welcome, Ruslan. W.H. Books. Yeah, I remember W.H. Smith books. But that was like in the 70s, 80s, something like that. Thank you, Ruslan. It's very complimentary. Someone says, I was yesterday on an interview. Your films helped me a lot. My videos. Well, good. I'm glad that they're helping out. Bluffton, if I'm saying that right, Bluffton says, thank you for holding these live streams. Well, thank you for showing up. These are all, this, for example, this is an experiment, okay? No preparation. I'm totally rambling. But I was just curious to see if people cared about this topic or not really. Some of these I do, the interest is not really there. So it's a great way for me to see and to hear from you guys what you're interested in learning. The Art of KAS says, repetition just kills me, but I formed that habit of telling over and over. I never like it, but it does work. Yes, you basically got to do it. Yeah, thank you. I will take care of my throat. That's why I have this. Felicity says, hi, Bill. You have so much knowledge and experience. I'm thankful that you have this channel. We're here because we value what you have to say and don't sell yourself short. Well, thank you, Felicia. Felicia, is that Felicia? Is that how you say that? I don't think I've ever actually met anyone called Felicia. I've heard, bye, Felicia. I've heard that about 10,000 times, but I never actually talked to anyone called Felicia. So congratulations. You are a very special person, Felicia. And I will remember the fact that I talked to you today. So, and thank you. The Art of Cass says, I got this in a previous job interview screener. Oh, the what is your leadership style? Yeah, I honestly don't know. If a recruiter asks this, I don't know what they're looking for. I'm sure there's all kinds of theories and you could probably look it up. But the thing is, jobs where that really matters, okay? Manager level and up, okay? Usually the decision maker is going to be a hiring manager, okay? Someone who's been in that role. Someone who's probably your boss. They're usually at the director level or higher, okay? The reason why they make the decision and they don't trust a recruiter to do it is because they know, recruiters don't know. Recruiters are a lot of them are entry-level type jobs, and they're good at what they do. They get candidates. They eliminate the obvious people that are just, obviously not qualified for very basic reasons. But when it comes to refining people more, taking a closer look at them, that's the hiring manager. And so they would know. And it's a lot of times not a matter of knowing. It's a matter of sort of they agree with what you have to say. A lot of this stuff, it's very, a lot of things when you're getting a job, it depends on whether you click with the person that's making the decision. There isn't an absolute right and an absolute wrong necessarily beyond a certain point. It's just, are you kind of going to do it in the style of the person who's going to be your boss, right? They have a preconceived notion of the type of person that they want, person who does things a certain way, namely the way they do it. That's what they're looking for. So the question is, do you jive with what they're looking for? Okay, do you have the same leadership style or management style as they do, right? That's kind of really what it boils down to. And that's why they will be the decision makers on it. So if a recruiter were to ask you this question at a low level, I'm not really sure what they're looking for. If you've been a supervisor, you've been a manager, what you would have to say. Maybe a short version of the answer I gave would work. You say, I can do this style, this style, this style, and this style. So then they think, oh, okay, this person knows several styles. So like, okay, they probably, it seems like they know what they're talking about. So, okay, check that box. They could lead people or they could manage people if necessary. Enrique says, going for an interview tomorrow for an assistant manager's position within the same company I work for. Just want to thank you for the content you provide as I will be utilizing your techniques. Thank you. You're absolutely welcome, Enrique, and I wish you the best of luck on that. Remember, number one thing in these job interviews is how likable you are, and then beyond that, if it's a sort of manager type position, how similar you are to the boss or the person you're going to be working with if they're not one and the same. And sometimes it's impossible to really know what their style is. You just sort of say your style and, hope for the best. There's no way to predict. But yeah, I wish you all the best. Somebody says, hello, Bill. What did you do as a leader when you feel your ethics has been tested? Oh, yes. What did I do? Well, I mean, there's a few situations there. I can't really disclose some of them, but yeah, like, okay, one obvious element there is for a few years, I had a job where I was the director of safety, quality, and environmental, basically, for a company. And I didn't really enjoy that role too much. I mean, the people I worked with, for the most part, were really great, so that's why I did it. But the problem is with those areas, although I believe in them immensely, like safety, quality, safety, environmental, and quality, is you're the person that's always putting the brakes on. People in the marketing department, marketing sales, people in the operations department, operations, supply chain, they're all wanting to just go ahead and get things done. They're wanting to make money. They're wanting to satisfy customers. They're wanting to, fill orders, et cetera, et cetera. And you're always the person that's going, wait a minute. You can't do that. You know the rules. In order to do this right, we would have to now jump through all these hoops. Right? That's a safety issue. That's an environmental issue. That's a quality issue. Right? So you're always working contrary to the main driving force of the business unit. That's the problem. Okay, you're the sort of control. There are rules, there are laws. Like if you work in HR, you're kind of like that too. The people who run the business, they just want to go ahead and run the business. And you're going, wait, it's actually not legal to do that, or it's not allowed to do that, or you're supposed to do this first. That's what you're there for. You're there because they're not experts on safety or quality or environmental. They're not experts on all the labor laws and what needs to be done in every circumstance. That's what you're there for, right? But, it really gets pushed when there's like a clash. When there's a difference in cultures. Like, look, this is a safety issue. This is going to come back to bite us in the ass if we don't do this now properly. But people that care more about production, they want to go ahead. They're like, no, you're slowing us down. You're watering us down. You're limiting what we can do. So sometimes it really comes to a head. And, you can't always adopt a sort of like hard stop. Sometimes you may not want to do that because it isn't it isn't a black and white issue. It's a gray issue. Things are not specified in great detail. Does it apply? Does it not apply? Well, we don't know. The thing to do would be to be prudent. But when you're faced with considerable pushback, it may not always be possible to just ram your course of action through. So there are that's an area where you frequently encounter that. what am I okay with? What am I not okay with? You know, there's no law that says we have to do this, but it's like, if we don't do this, it's really asking for trouble. You know, it's just not the way I would like to see things done. So you encounter a lot of those type of situations, and my hat goes off to anybody, that works in those areas. Like I imagine legal is like that too. You're pushing back, but I think that generally people would listen more to legal than they would to some of these other areas. But not necessarily. It depends, right? So anyone that's in those kinds of positions, I kind of have a sort of special spot in my heart for, because I know what it's like to be in that situation. You know, you got 10 people in a room and they all want to go full speed ahead, and you're the one person that says, sorry guys, but we can't. We can't because of this. And you got to let everybody down. You know, it's and there's one of you and there's 10 of them, and it feels like you're fighting those battles a lot. So a lot of that kind of stuff comes from being in roles like that. You know, anyone who's ever had to deal with firing an employee, you also know what I'm talking about there. Like, there's certain legal things you have to go through, and you go through all those. Okay, where I am, just to summarize it, in order, if you have a real problem with an employee, the employee is consistently underperforming. They might be doing bad things. They've got a negative attitude. They're making comments to other employees that other employees find offensive. It's creating issues, right? Now, how far do you go to give that employee a chance, to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? It always feels like no matter how far you go, when you reach the end of the line where you're like, that's it, I've done everything I'm legally required to do, and then I've gone so far beyond that to really give you a chance, and you keep not rising to the challenge. You always think like, okay, have I given this person enough of a chance, right? So it's kind of an ethical issue. It's not a legal issue, it's just an ethical. It's like, are you okay with this? You're never okay with it. We have to let somebody go. I'm never okay with it. I'm not a sociopath that's totally fine with doing that. Even someone that I personally feel frustrated with, I've never been okay with that. So I think anybody who's been in that position will say, well, yeah, that's kind of a gray area, and I'm not really comfortable with how things went down, right? So, I mean, but that just comes with the territory, unfortunately. If you're in charge and you're accountable, that's the sort of ugly side of it, and you have to be able to deal with that kind of stuff when you're in certain circles. Farouk says leaders should be inspirational, managers functional. Sure, if that's what you believe, who am I to challenge that? As a leader, I delegated roles and tasks to those who were best placed to do those jobs. I took overall responsibility. Yeah. Makes sense. Rod says, here in Brazil, the company can be sued if we tell an employee that they are being fired due to performance issues. Well, yeah, you can be sued, and in most countries, if you tell, doesn't mean necessarily that you're gonna lose, right? You can sue someone for absolutely anything, especially in the United States. I mean, I'm not in the United States, but I mean, like, I could sue someone for the way they looked at me if I wanted to. I mean, I'm sure I'm going to lose, but I could. Right? If I'm going to risk a lot of my own money and going, filing stuff with lawyers, if not going to court, is not really stressful for me, I can do that. I can stress them out by taking this kind of action against them. And maybe that's what you were intending in the first place. You never intended to win. You just intended to stress them out and have them burn up some of their money in hiring lawyers to consult with them and defend them and, this kind of thing, right? Some people do that. Some people do these kind of malicious things, right? But I mean, where I am in Canada, yes, you can sue your employer if they for wrongful dismissal, but that's why there's legal best practices. First of all, there's legal requirements of what you're supposed to do. Okay, it is possible for you to fire an employee for performance issues. Okay, the law doesn't say to a company you must continue to pay this person even though they don't listen to a word you say, they never show up for work, they're openly hostile to you. They harass everybody around them. There's no legal requirement that you have to keep employing them, okay? But if you want to dismiss them for performance issues, you do have to do a few things, okay? And in a nutshell, you have to speak with them on multiple occasions. You have to document what the complaint is. You have to give it to them in writing. You have to have a one-on-one meeting with them. You have to explain the thing in writing to them. This is our issue. Okay. You have to have a plan to improve. You say, I'll give you 30 days. Here's specifically what I expect you to do in the 30 days. If you don't do that, here's what the next course of action is. You give that to them in writing. You then have a meeting with them, at some later date, maybe a week or two later, where you give a progress report. Say, this is how you're doing. You're on track to improve or you're not. And then if you still don't improve by this date, we will reach a decision at this point and this will be the effect. Stuff like that. There's stuff you have to do. Now, after that, and you dismiss them for performance issues, so it's like dismissal with cause, you can defend yourself. You say, look, we were very, very clear to the employee. Okay, we spoke to them. We gave it to them in writing. There are witnesses to the conversation. They told me they understood. They signed the paper. We gave them a chance to improve very specifically. We had a meeting with them, told them how they were doing. They were given another chance to improve very specifically. That was also done in writing. And because they did not improve by this date, we then dismissed them for this reason. And that's all documented. So if you go about that stuff, I didn't give you the exact legal process, but it's something similar to that. It's very hard for someone to turn around and say, well, I'm being treated unfairly, or you're doing something illegal, right? So that's why we have HR. HR, they consult on matters like that. It deals with employees. What's the requirement that we should do? How do we do this properly? They consult on that. And this kind of thing. So if you jump through all those hoops, you can still do it. And if someone tried to sue you afterwards, they'd probably not get very far because you've done everything you're expected to do. You've been very clear. You've given them every chance. It's all documented. It's all witnessed. So it's very hard for someone to come back and say, you did something wrong. Okay? That's how that stuff goes. We always tell it's a reconfiguration. Yeah, hopefully you don't need to resort to these, the terminology, the weird terminology there. They usually do that stuff when they're doing a reorganization, right? Here's an excuse to restructure the company and fire half your workforce, right? Yeah, stupid. Yes, we need to go through a very detailed process, verbal and writing warnings, exactly what you're saying. Yes. Farouk says, you can't give a personal or negative reference for being afraid of being sued. All you can say is how long they worked for your organization and what role they perform. Yeah. Cool. Well, anyway, it's been nearly 2 hours. I have to sign off pretty soon, but I want to thank everybody who tuned in for this. It's 22 of you guys here. You guys are all awesome. And I know it was kind of rambling and unstructured, but hopefully somebody got something out of this. Thank you to all the people who commented. And I will be back with my regular Q&A live stream tomorrow, where I answer any question you might have about the hiring process, resumes, job interviews, that kind of thing, careers, everything there. Okay? Thanks so much. You guys are awesome. I will see you tomorrow. And I wish you every success. Take care.